Hi everybody, this is Mr. Mintner coming to you on a Sunday afternoon from Castle High School. We are studying genetic disorders in class, and I thought I would make this quick video to help you out. Genetic disorders, as you know, come from abnormalities on the chromosomes. So we have chromosome number 1, chromosome number 2, number 3, so on. And remember, those letters that we're talking about, whether they're dominant or recessive, are located on each one of these chromosomes. So there might be a big A here and a little a here, or a little a and a little a, but there's two letters and they represent genes on these chromosomes. If the genetic disorders happen on any of the chromosomes other than the 23rd pair, which determine whether you're a boy or a girl, the sex chromosomes, any of these are called autosomal disorders. And if they appear on here, particularly on the X chromosome, those are sex-linked. And that's one way we'll distinguish them. And then there's another type called non-disjunction that we'll talk about in this video as well. So let's start with autosomal disorders. Remember, those are the ones that happen on any of the chromosomes that are not sex chromosomes, X or Y. So the way we know they're autosomal is most of the time you see equal distribution of these diseases in boys and girls, in males and females across the population. So because it's not related to whether you're a boy or a girl, it's easily transmitted to either the boy or the girl, the male or the female. The three that we're going to talk about, there are thousands of these. Three we're going to talk about is cystic fibrosis, which is transmitted on chromosome number 7. So if we go back, chromosome number 7 in here, if you've got the faulty genes causing cystic fibrosis, they'll be on this chromosome. You'd have to have a recessive and a recessive on this chromosome. Huntington's disease, which is on chromosome number 4, and it's kind of different because most of these disorders are recessive. Huntington's disease is actually a dominant trait. So if you are a child of someone with Huntington's disease, you've got a 50-50 chance of getting it. And then sickle cell anemia, which is on chromosome number 11. So we're going to look at these first, starting with cystic fibrosis. A cystic fibrosis is a disease that causes mucus to be built up in the air ducts of your lungs. And so what happens is it also kind of blocks in the pancreas and your digestive system, so it makes it very difficult to digest foods also. But when your lungs, normally you have lining there that's supposed to be slick to allow things to flow through fine, but with cystic fibrosis it becomes a mucus, and you often have to turn those children over and beat on their backs and beat on their sides and help them break that mucus up. People with cystic fibrosis usually live into used to be they died in their teens. Now a lot of them are living into their 20s and early 30s. But they have a lower lifespan because of the prone to infections and things that they have because of this in their lungs. It's an unfortunate disease. It is a recessive disease on, like I said, chromosome number 7. The next one we're going to look at is Huntington's disease. Huntington's disease is a really, really unfortunate disease. It happens in adults. It usually doesn't come in until you're in your late 30s, early 40s, and then you don't have much of a life expectancy after that. It causes your muscles to you start fidgeting at first, and then you start losing control of your muscles, and your mind goes downhill very, very quickly, much like Alzheimer's. So people with Huntington's disease, they don't live real long once they get it, and it's a bad disease to go through and for people's families to go through. But it is a dominant disorder, meaning that if you have it and you're in your late 30s and early 40s and you discover it, you've already had children, there's a 50-50 chance that their kids will have it. So that makes this one of those diseases that some people would want to get tested for to find out before they decided if they were a child of someone with Huntington's disease. It's an unfortunate disease. The last one that we're going to look at is sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia, mostly in your red blood cells, It's called sickle cell disease, but they refer to it as anemia because your red blood cells carry your oxygen, and they're usually round or donut shaped like this. If you have sickle cell disease, instead of getting this round shape, they look like this, like a crescent moon. That causes all kinds of problems. One of them is that you become anemic, meaning you're not carrying enough oxygen, so you're really tired and lethargic all of the time. But it causes other things. You're more likely to have strokes. You're more likely to have a number of problems if you have sickle cell disease. It normally affects, whereas Huntington's disease and cystic fibrosis normally affects people of European descent, sickle cell usually affects people of African descent. And the reason for that is because that recessive allele, when you are heterozygous and you have that, it protects you against malaria. So in areas of the world where there's been a lot of mosquitoes and a lot of malaria, there's this gene that is developed that helps protect people. However, if you are homozygous for it and you get the disease, that's really bad. Heterozygous for it, you're actually better protected against malaria than people that don't carry the gene. So that's why it's there. The next group of traits that we'll look at are sex-linked traits, and these are carried on the X chromosome. And so when you are XX, like a girl, usually one of your X's will counteract the bad gene in the other X, so you end up being healthy. Sex-linked traits almost always, well over 90% of the cases are in males. So that's how you know whether you have a sex-linked trait, is it shows up in males far more often than in females. If you have a autosomal disorder, it's about equal male and female. But if it's almost always males and very few females, that's a sex-linked trait. The two that we're going to look at is Duchenne muscular dystrophy and hemophilia. So let's start with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Shows up mostly in boys because it's sex-linked. You get that bad X, and then you get a Y that can't counteract the bad X, so you end up getting the disease. Causes usually start showing up around the age of 2 or 3. You lose your muscles atrophy, and they lose their ability to function, and so you're bound to a wheelchair. Don't have a very long lifespan. It's a pretty rough disease to get. The next one that's sex-linked that we'll talk about is hemophilia, and that is, it causes a lot of bruising and stuff, but it's a very dangerous disease because your blood does not have the ability to clot and form scabs. So a little cut could become life-threatening. But even with the right treatment, so that you take the medication so your blood will clot, it clots still more slowly, and since it's still bleeding on the inside there, you get these big bruises, and it's a horrible thing. They are sex-linked, meaning they're carried on the X. Far more often you see them in boys than girls. The last set of genetic disorders is caused by something called non-disjunction. If you remember, you have one chromosome from your dad and one from your mom, and then during interphase you double those, and so now I got these two and these two. And then during meiosis, they all come together and they do the crossing over in prophase 1. In anaphase 1, 2 of them at a time, it might be 2 like this. They move apart, and then they go through like the whole set of cycle again, the whole set of prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase again. And then the next time, these 2 separate to form haploid, and these 2 are supposed to separate, but what happens is they don't, and they go together. And so you end up with a gamete with double the chromosomes of one chromosome. So it could be the 21st, it could be any of the chromosomes, but you get double, and so when they go together with another one to form with a gamete and a gamete to form a zygote, in fertilization you get 3, or sometimes you get none, or you just get 1. The way you know when you have a non-disjunction is instead of 46 chromosomes, you've got either 47 or 45. You get an extra, or your short one, because when these 2 came together, that left this one with 1 fewer chromosome. I hope that makes sense. This will maybe help show it. you've got metaphase here, metaphase 2, and then in anaphase 2, they're separating, but instead of one red going this way and one red going this way, two go this way. So now this over here, whenever we have telophase and then cytokinesis, they'll have an extra red, and this side will have one fewer red. Okay, typical diseases that we're going to talk about that have non-disjunction are Down syndrome. In Down syndrome, you get an extra 21st chromosome. So if I go back up here and I look at the 21st chromosome, there's supposed to be 2. I get a third one. If I get 3 chromosomes at chromosome 21, I get Down syndrome. I love kids with Down syndrome. They're so happy. They're so nice. I used to work at a camp right out of high school, and I work with kids, and I have so many stories, and you just have to love them. But they have issues with learning disabilities, and they have a definite facial features. If you notice the hand here, it's fatter and more stubby. There are tests that you can do right away when a child's born to see whether they have this or not. But, that's caused by non-disjunction of the 21st chromosome. Another one, and these are both have to do with non-disjunction of the 23rd, the sex chromosomes. But it's non-disjunction because I'm getting that where I'm getting extra or I'm getting one fewer on the sex chromosome. So this is actually happening on here. So I might only get, in Turner syndrome, instead of getting 2 X's, I only get 1 X. So she only has 1 X in Turner syndrome. And that causes the neck to be a little wider, they're a little shorter, and they don't, this just happens in girls, they just have 1 X instead of 2, and they're sterile. They don't have menstrual cycles, they can't get pregnant, they can't have children. So other than that, they can lead fairly normal lives, but they're shorter and they got some abnormalities with how they look a little bit, not a huge amount, but they have their menstrual cycles don't ever start, and they never can have children. The other one that we'll talk about is Klinefelter syndrome, and I don't have a picture here. There are plenty of them on the internet, but I didn't want to put any of them in a school because in a school video because they show parts that I don't want to show. But Klinefelter syndrome, you get an extra X and the Y, so you're XXY. So you're male, you have the Y chromosome, but you have 3 sex chromosomes, 2 X's. So what that means is, although you're a male, you have some things that happen to you. You grow very tall, usually. You're taller than your dad, usually taller than all your brothers. You're very tall. However, you got very long legs. You got very wide hips. You start getting secondary female characteristics. You have very wide hips. You actually start to develop breasts. You don't grow a beard very well. Lots of things happen. Even though you're male, you have secondary sex characteristics that cause you to have some female characteristics as well. A lot of people with Klinefelter syndrome also have other things that are wrong with them as well, but that's the main thing. You have 2 X's, which would normally give you the female characteristic, but the Y, so you actually have the male parts, they're just smaller than normal, and you've got breast and wide hips, and you can't really grow a beard. Very, very few, very little body hair, period, actually. So those are all of the genetic disorders that we're going to cover in class. Like I said, there are thousands and thousands of them. You have to know these for our test. You will need to be able to know them well enough to be able to use them in those things that we do in class where we have to determine whether a person's a carrier.